institution. And he said that the opportunity might arise in the near future, and if I was still interested in the position, let him know. And I so did, and he came back and told me that the director of the new Moorland-Spingarn Research Center was interviewing people, and if I wanted to, he would suggest that I be one of the individuals selected for to be interviewed. I came up and I met Dr. Winston, and I interviewed him, or he interviewed me, really. And we came to an understanding that I thought it would be a great opportunity for me to be able to come to Moorland and work in an archival program here. My understanding was that I thought I was going to come and be working with other individuals within the program. To my surprise, when I came here, I found that I was not to be working with someone in the program. I was to develop the program. And that's how I came to Howard.
Tag, you're it.
Dr. Simpson.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, Dr. Winston, thank you for honoring the staff that worked here during those lean times. Lots of comments from people that came here to do research that we were one of the most helpful research centers in the country. So we did work with, but we enjoyed that work. I came here in 1974. I was working in the Black Studies Division at Martin Luther King Library, and Dr. Battle and James Johnson would always come by and say hello, talk to me and everything. And so they recommended me to Dr. Winston when he was looking for a librarian. So so through them that I was able to get an interview. And so when I came up and I interviewed with Dr. Winston, and I saw Dolores LaFall, who was the chief librarian at that time, and she said, I was hoping it was you, because you used to help me in the Black Studies Division when I would come in to do research. To this day, I do not remember helping her. But that's how I got here. I got here because of recommendations from Dr. Battle and James Johnson. And when I got here, since I worked in Black Studies, when I got here, on my desk was a bud vase with a flower in it, my name tag, and a reference letter. They didn't give me any training yet. They just gave me a letter and said, okay, you worked in Black Studies before, go for it. So I hit the road running, and that's how I got it.
Mr. Coates.
I hope I can be as brief as Jan, but this is real emotional. So I came here, I got to Howard because I used to sell books on Howard's campus as a vendor. I sold Black books, and I was always, through that experience, I became exposed to many of the self-trained historians. So in between the downtime of selling books, I'd ask somebody to watch my table. And I do want to say that Jan was one of my best customers. I honor her. She was one of my best customers when I was selling those books. But I would leave the table in front of what is now the School of Business and come over and go through the books, go through the documents that gave me better history on the Black bibliophiles and collectors. At some point, I decided that I was spending enough time actually in the collections, and I wanted to especially work in Black collections to further that knowledge, that I might as well go back to library school, and that's what I did. I went to library school. Dr. Battle probably doesn't remember this, but I met him at a ALA conference, actually, and you referred me to Miss Baker, who was your assistant, but Dr. Winston's assistant, I believe, before that. Matter of fact, yeah, she was Dr. Winston's assistant at that time. Miss Baker was a jewel, and I celebrate her name in this space. But she, in fact, was the one who told me, I applied as a librarian, and she said, well, I don't know, there's an opening in manuscripts. And she's the one who guided me, and she's the one actually that I credit with getting me to work at Howard University.
Ms. Woods.
Yes, my story is most similar to Dr. Battles. I was a student here at Howard University in the history department working on my PhD. We had, at that time, there was a requirement in our historiography courses. We had two separate semesters that we had to visit Moorland-Spingarn to complete an assignment that was worth 35% of our grade. You fail it, you done. So we had to come to Moorland and look through a list or an array, choose from a list or array of collections in the manuscripts division. Dr. Jones was working in manuscripts at that time, and Ms. Elbashir was the curator. And so what we had to do was go through, spend some time with the collection and write a paper based on a set of questions, stipulations, guidelines provided by Dr. David DeLeon, who's our professor. And so I did that, and Ms. Elbashir remarked to me that I spent more time on the assignment than anybody else. And so that if I ever wanted to come and help her out or do, work at Moorland, then she would be able to make that happen. And so eventually I worked for Mrs. Elbashir in manuscripts over a summer. And then that turned into an opportunity to work with Dr. Muse as a student intern. And I began processing collections by Dr. Lopez Matthews was his archivist at the time. And so I started in the processing room as a student intern. So I started as a student. And that gave me the opportunity to work on the presidential papers of Mordecai Johnson and the presidential papers of James Nabrett. And then when a position came open, when Lopez created the digital productions manager position that he created and moved out of university archives to develop the digital plan for Moorland-Spingarn and for university libraries, then the archivist position came open, and Dr. Muse said, a position is coming open, I want you to apply, you'll be an asset to Moorland-Spingarn if I can get you in. And so that's how I came to Moorland-Spingarn.
Thank you. Okay, my next question is to each of you. What were the most memorable and most gratifying moments or events during your time at Moorland-Spingarn?
Starting with, why don't you start the other way around?
Yes,
Because I tend to talk too much.
I have these moments every day, every week. It's very hard to say this is the most gratifying, but I'll give one, and I think at least one person in this room has heard me tell this story before. Dr. Jones, I'm sure has heard me tell this story before. At one point, I was helping out in the reading room, helping with reference and working in the reading room when students and other scholars come in to complete assignments or do their research. It was late in the afternoon one day, and this young lady came in with two of her children, two little girls. They had dolls and pocketbooks and, clearly did not want, the three of them did not want to be there. So this was a young student who had two small daughters, both under the age of, let's say, 8. And so they were rolling their eyes like, why are we not at the playground? Why are we here? And the mother was trying to complete her assignment as well. She didn't want to be there. But the assignment, I believe, was from Afro-American Studies, maybe. And she was there to look at, we had some boxes set up already on the cart. She was there to kind of look at and answer some questions, some basic questions, look at some papers from the Frederick Douglass collection. And so I pulled the box, set her up at the table, and she started going through, pull the folder out and we'll look at it and put it back in, pull the folder out, and then she started really fumbling through the box. And she she would stop and then she grabbed her chest. She said, "Why is my chest beating so hard?" And I said, "That's the purpose of you being in here. They wanted to expose you to something." She said, "Wait, this is really Frederick Douglass's signature. This is his handwriting." And so I saw her do a 180, and her somebody who was not interested in being at Moorland-Spingarn at all or completing her assignment. I saw her do a 180 in how emotional she got when she realized what she was touching and what she was given the privilege to witness, or given the privilege to assess. So that's just one instance where I get to help researchers and get to see people have a come to Jesus moment, basically, about what a manuscript such as something Frederick Douglass generated, how that changes somebody's mind about what Moorland-Spingarn is, or develops their curiosity about what we do, what an archivist does, and just about history in general. So, I have those experiences every week.
Mr. Coates.
I think probably most memorable probably is my first day working at Moorland-Spingarn. I had gone to Atlanta University. I went with the intention of working in a Black institution, and everyone there told me, "Don't do that. Don't focus on working in a Black institution. It's just no jobs, no future." But I did it anyway. I came back and I was hired here. But there was a problem. When I was in Atlanta, I actually had a mental breakdown. I can say that now. So when I came back, I really didn't want to be around people, and I didn't know that I could be around people, even though I had applied for the job. I remember leaving home that day, the first day of coming to work, and I told my wife that I didn't know whether or not I could make it that day. And she told me, she said, "Well, if you can't make it, just come back home. Just come back home." I came that first day and I didn't know whether I could make it. And I was introduced to Dr. Sinnett, who was someone who we missed each other in Atlanta. Wherever I went, they said, "You need to meet Dr. Sinnett." She also loved Black bibliophiles and collectors and self-trained historians. And wherever she went, they said, "You need to meet Paul Coates." But we missed each other. And here she was working at Moorland-Spingarn, and I didn't know it. I met Dr. Sinnett, I met Karen Jefferson, and whatever was on me at the time, whatever was there that had me feeling I couldn't work or couldn't be around people, it left with that meeting of Dr. Sinnett and Karen. That's probably the most memorable.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Simsworth.
I have two I'm going to mention right quickly. Several years ago, we had an online journal called HU Archives Net. And it was a journal, we did special issues, special topics, and the scholarly articles, bibliographies, book reviews, and we even had a section for children, such as we might do a word search on that particular issue. And what was most gratifying for me was that I was able to be the guest editor for the one that we did on the Voting Rights Act. And the Voting Rights Act, we had gotten a grant to develop the Voting Rights Act Oral History and Documentation Project. So this issue was focusing mainly on that. And also we had an Archives Week, it was 1999. We had an Archives Week, and the symposium that we did, the articles came from that symposium. So I was really happy to be the guest editor for that particular issue. The other thing was when we got some Lucy Dick slow papers. One day, a gentleman came up, one of the custodial workers came up to the library, and he stopped into Maisha Hall's office first, and he said, "Don't you collect this type of stuff?" And so she grabbed it, she looked at it, she read it, and I was on the desk. She grabbed it and said, "Jane, look at this." I looked down there, this was Lucy Dick's materials, her handwriting and everything. And he said they were tearing down a building. I can't remember which building it was, but and they had found this file cabinet with these papers in it. And they were getting ready, they didn't know, they were getting ready to throw that stuff out. Had it not been for that custodial worker bringing that material up there. And so I called Dr. Muse. I said, then, honey, I don't even think Dr. Muse said goodbye. Dr. Muse threw that phone down and said, tell that man not to throw that stuff out. We're on our way. So he grabbed a couple of the guys and they went down there and got the Lucy Dix Slow paper. As of course, as we know, Lucy Dix Slow was the first dean of women on the campus. So, I mean, had it not been for that custodial worker, we would have lost those papers.
Very interesting. Dr. Muse?
Well, being the archivist here at Howard for over 40 years, I can say that every day was a day in which I enjoyed my job. That was the sole purpose why I stayed here at the university for so long. It gave me an opportunity to interact with famous researchers, famous authors, famous professors from all over the world. And to be in that position for a country kid from the swamps of New Jersey was just a treasure that I saw was bestowed upon me. And so just by coming here and being able to contribute to saving the history not only of Black people, but particularly Howard University, because the purpose of the Howard University archives was to preserve the historical records of the university. And prior to that, even though under Dr. Battle, the manuscript division was the de facto archive, when I came here, there was a full-time person. And I saw that as my mission, and I enjoyed that, and I felt that I was contributing to the legacy of the university. And if I don't leave anything, I'm a two-time graduate, master's and doctorate from the university. If I don't leave anything else behind here at the university, I can say I contributed to his legacy of saving its history. Now I'm going to say this short story, and Dr. Winston would probably have some information about this, but this was something that was just extraordinary that happened to me, and as an example of what you may never know, what you might find yourself in or dealing with. I got a call from the history department one day, Howard University History Department, and they said, we want you to come over on the fourth floor, which is the history department. There was a administrative office that had cabinets that they locked. They were old coat cabinets, I guess. And they had unlocked the cabinet. And they found this package in there. And they wanted to know what the package was. And nobody was going to open it because they didn't want to, well, they didn't know if they should. And because my position was university archivist and I could handle archival materials of the university, they felt that I would be the most appropriate person to come over and look at the package. So I went over to the history department, I got the package. I talked with the then chairman and was given the permission to remove the package to take it back to my office. So I went back to the office and I opened up the package and there was this metal can. And I was just wondering what it was. I couldn't figure out what this metal can was. And when I opened the can, there was this piece of paper inside. It said E. Franklin Fraser. These were the cremation of E. Franklin Fraser that had been put in that. There was this, I guess it's urn, and it had been put into that locked closet, and they had locked and it had been there for, I guess, decades. This is in the 80s, and that's how I found out that those cremation ashes belonged to him. And I reported to Dr. Battle and told him, and that was just an extraordinary day for me because, I mean, I had read everything about E. Franklin Fraser because he's such a fantastic, individual, but to find out that actually those were his ashes. It was a fascinating discovery for me.
Say something about that.
No, I don't want to add.
At the bottom.
What is most gratifying? I spent, until I retired, virtually my entire adult life at Howard University. When I looked at it within the context of Moorland-Spingarn, it is almost impossible for me to find any one thing that was most gratifying because there was so much that we were doing. Moorland-Spingarn, we have to remember, was the manuscript division and library divisions was breaking up what had been how we would manage resources that were already here. But there was also created the Howard University Archives, which Dr. Muse has talked about, and the Howard University Museum. The museum was not a new idea. That had gone back quite a long time. Kelly Miller had promoted a museum. So in many ways, the opening of the museum was most gratifying because it really demonstrated for those who would view us from the outside inward how we were growing and expanding. And that became in many ways, our public presence, both for the entire university community, started to come and bring any potential faculty members, students, or whatever, as well as the community outside of the university. So in so many ways, the museum fits that bill. If I look at another aspect, Dr. Winston and I, ultimately and fundamentally, I don't know if I shared this notion with him, essentially, we were salesmen. And what we sold was Howard University. And we sold Howard University, its faculty, its expertise, and all of what we did to those individuals that we were pursuing to some extent to become donors to this new adventure, this new Moorland-Spingarn Research Center. I would probably say what has been most gratifying was the support we received as evidenced by all of the donors to Moorland-Spingarn Research Center. Many folks looked upon us as being in competition with other HBCUs. I would tell people that no, we were in competition with the Library of Congress and the Smithsonian in terms of where we really had to battle. So given that, and given our success as salesmen, the support we received by our donors, and you notice I keep saying donors, and I say that because people had the confidence in us that they would give to Howard University what they would not sell to another institution. And I always felt that, given that, I never worried about not being successful, because if you can only beat us in terms of what we're offering and what we're trying to do, because your pockets are much deeper than ours. Our faith came into those who felt that what they were doing and what they were supporting in Moorland-Spingarn Research Center was worth more than the money they would receive. And I think that there are very few instances, and you can look at the range of collections here, and that represents the support we received and validated what good salesmen I would say that we were.
Thank you, Dr. Winston.
Thank you, Dr. Battle. Well, you've heard a little bit of the all-round, all-purpose, jack of trades, of all trades, aspects of Moorland-Spingarn, because we were also doing publicity. We were showing up in Jet and Ebony. We were showing up in churches. We were getting major Black organizations to support us. So, for example, most people on the campus had never heard of the ancient Egyptian Arabic order of the nobles of the mystic shrine. The Shriners turned out to be the biggest cash donors we ever had. They came every year to present a check to Moorland-Spingarn and a check to the Howard University Hospital. And they came in their full regalia, and they were very serious. But to answer Mr. Abebe's question, it wasn't an event that was most significant to me. It was a process that was a part of my calling, not a job. It was a calling. And that was as a teacher. The most important thing I did at Howard University, I have to say it, was not Moorland-Spingarn. It was interacting with students and watching them develop. An awful lot of the early employees at Moorland-Spingarn after I became director were former students of mine. Karen Jefferson was my student. I wasn't the history department. She was my student. And when I first came, I saw we had a lot of student assistants. And I said, these are young people, and on this campus, we have brilliant students. You know, there's a lot of talk about, oh, well, our students are from here and there, and they don't know this, they don't know that. We have brilliant students. But an awful lot of people making those kinds of comments had never interacted with the other students, all right? And so one of my first actions was to make sure that every staff member had a blue coat. The students had short coats, and the director had a long coat. But everybody was in a blue coat. And if you saw the difference that made, you know, you go down to the hospital, you got all these people with white coats. You came to Moorland-Spingarn, they were professionals in blue coats.
Monogram.
Oh, yeah.
MSRC AT.
Special order, and it changed people. Because now, whatever their classification in the university, freshmen, sophomores on, they had the same color coat on as Mrs. Stokes. And Mrs. Stokes was a major figure in making those students into professionals. All right? She managed the reading room. And I have to say, there were people in the building who made complaints about it, saying, you know, Mrs. Stokes is not a librarian with a degree. And Michael Winston is down there in Moorland-Spingarn having people pretend that they're librarians. I said, Mrs. Stokes never pretends she's a librarian. She's just the greatest director of reader services in town, period.
Yes.
And her students, and I call them her students, were proud. They came to work on time. They knew how to talk to a researcher. They never threw a book down or a manuscript down. They placed it before the researcher. And then every graduation, we honored our Moorland-Spingarn student assistants. That was important to them, and it was important for the morale of the center. Because if you know our history, you know that getting respect has been an issue since slavery. And if you think that that is just from some historical knowledge, you're wrong. Michael R. Winston's paternal grandfather was born as property just outside of Richmond, Virginia in 1861. Came to Howard University in 1886, graduated from prep in 89, and graduated from the college in 1893. I know from my personal family history that respect is beyond price. And when those young people walked in the doors of Moorland-Spingarn, they had something to show. And they were an integral part of the staff. So watching that process, watching my students I started teaching at Howard University in 1964. I know some of the younger people here can't believe that. But in 1964, I joined the faculty of the history department. And watching people develop, not just in knowledge, but in their capacities, in their reach. And it was just representative of what happens at this institution. So what it did for me is more than gratifying. I know a lot of words, but I don't have the words to express what it meant to work here over those years, what it meant to go into the community representing Howard University. And we had a community program that was significant. A group you never heard of, I can say confidently. It was the We Angels. A lady named Mrs. Vivian Ashton got on to what we were doing. And she said, well, you know, I am also working on a project. She said, We Angels are rescuing Black cemeteries in Washington, D.C. because the developers are buying them up, they're closing them, or in some cases, just plowing over them. Well, Moorland-Spingarn gave Mrs. Ashton a platform, and she was a regular person here, someone we saw all the time. All kinds of community organizations. Don't leave out our churches. One lady came into my office one day and said, my family has belonged to this church, I won't name it, for a long time. And we have found in a private home some documents that look very strange. So I'm going to bring those and let you see them. And if you think they're interesting for Howard, we'll leave them right here. Turned out to be 19th century entries in a notebook by Bishop Daniel A. Payne of the AME Church, the first Black college president, one of the great powers in American history. And if you want to have a special experience of Black history, you read his autobiography, Recollections of 70 Years by Daniel A. Payne. That man had to leave South Carolina because they had outlawed Black churches because they found out people learned to read. The only jurisdiction in Christendom that ever shut down churches because people learned how to read. So I can say that process was the most gratifying thing.
Thank you very much, Dr. Winston. I have a few more questions, but because of time, I'll let the audience ask questions now. So if you have any questions for any of our panelists, please. Yes, ma'am.
At first, it's not a question. I'm Dr. Winston's academic daughter. So I owe a lot to Dr. Winston and Dr. Sin because when I was at the tender age of about 22, until I graduated with my PhD at 28. Mrs. Winston, I apologize. If he came home tired, I was part of it. If he had some gray hair, I was part of it. Because I would go, and these students have no clue how it works. You had a drawer, right, Dr. Winston? You had to pull out this drawer, student, and it had a hole through it with some little cards. And if you pulled it too hard, everything fell on the floor. Then I had to fill out the paper. And I was taught by Leander Mass, the great negligence pioneer. So I would go the day, each day I would fill out about 20. So when I came in the library, I was prepared. Dr. Winston, And he had to go down into the stacks or up into the stacks, which were stacks like toilet stacks in the airport. You have to tell them because they don't know what a dial phone is. They don't know what those phones that you have at the airport. What you call them again? They don't. Public telephones. They have any. They don't know transistor radios. So you have to tell them what a stack is. And that elevator didn't work. He had to go up and down, but my books were ready. And there was a card. You guys just click, 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 and you get everything. So I'm eternally grateful because with 2 children and a husband and everything is X, you're never X in my life. I'm sorry, darling. But I have to for you. You're never X.
We've been married 60 years.
You're never X. And the library had books about the Caribbean that I was studying, as well as Afro-Hispanic studies. So y'all need to go in there and check it out. Because a lot of students have never been in there, Dr. Winston and Dr. Singh. Sorry, thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Dr. Winston, you shared with me informally how you got the Cobb papers, the W. Montague Cobb papers, how he works with you. I don't think people understand how much effort it takes to be kind to a donor in order for the materials to be transferred back to us. So could you share with
I'm trying to be quick with this. Dr. W. Montague Cobb was head of the anatomy department at the university. He was a 1929 graduate of Howard Medical School and was interested in the history of medicine and the history of us in medicine. He was editor for many years of the Journal of the National Medical Association and had published more about the history of blacks in medicine than anyone else in the country. He could be a very difficult person, like many people. I knew that he had to have, this was all inference, he had to have what would be among the most valuable papers, private papers, of anyone. So I started a campaign, nice and quiet, seeing Dr. Cobb down at his office in the medical school and later at his home on Fairmont Street. Dr. Cobb talked more than I did. So you were in for a long visit. And he would call, my wife would answer the phone, Dr. Cobb's on the line. He said, I want you to come over to my house. So I'd go over. He would play the violin for a little while. Listen, I bet you haven't heard this. He'd play the violin for a little while. Then he'd tell me stories. Then he'd go from book to book in whichever room we were. Every room was full of books. And I would go week after week to hear Dr. Cobb. And then we worked together when I went on the board of the National NAACP. And he was the president that year. Well, of course, that intensified this connection and hearing Dr. Cobb's stories about the Civil Rights Movement and so on and so forth. The Imhotep Conference, which any black person who gets Medicare now, you owe an awful lot to Montague Cobb and the National Medical Association. Because the American Medical Association opposed Medicare consistently as socialized medicine. The National Medical Association, our association, lobbied for it. And President Lyndon Johnson was someone who wanted to get that support. So when Dr. Battle talks to you about being the curator of manuscripts, it wasn't just coming to the office through the front door. It was seeing all of these donors talking their heads off. We got the Benjamin Elijah Mays papers which drove almost every alumnus of Morehouse College crazy. All right? Because his papers are here. But that didn't just happen. He woke up one day and said, oh, I need to give the papers to Howard. And when the time came, Dr. Battle and his staff went to Atlanta to pack them up, bring them here. When we got the Vernon Jordan papers, staff went up to New York, and I have to say, among donors, Mr. Jordan was a prince. He lived in the Fifth Avenue, Manhattan apartment. He went up in the elevator opened up, and you were in the apartment. And he had a dinner for us. Catered dinner, cooked by his cook, and he was enthusiastic about his papers coming to Howard University. So there are all kinds of wonderful stories.
Thank you, Dr. Winston.
May I
Yes,
make a comment?
Yes.
Dr. Winston may or may not remember this, but we did travel a lot, and we were often together, the odd couple. We were in Alabama. We've gone to doing various things. We were dealing with the papers of Alabama State,
H. Council
Trenholm papers, and there were issues involving that. So we were there pursuing that. We also, while there, went to Tuskegee. And on our way from Tuskegee, we were headed back to the airport. And I don't recall how, I was not driving, but we were moving at a rather high rate of speed that attracted some of the local officials. And I remember the gentleman said to Dr. Winston when he had stopped us, and Winston told him we were from Washington, D.C. and whatever. And I remember him saying, you know, you boys, basically the speed limit is the same in Alabama as Washington, D.C., and it is not the 90 or whatever.
It wasn't quite 90.
Well, they took Dr. Winston back to the car, and I remember thinking, okay, if they do what they might do, what am I going to do to get out of this? But he told them we were on our way to the airport and whatever, and they literally followed it, let him go. But they literally followed us all the way to the airport, and until we got out and to turn the car in and to make the flight. So when we talk about some of these adventures, some of them in some places were challenging. And that's one that I never forgot because my family was from the South, but that was a little beyond what we were prepared to deal with. But I will never forget it. You boys know, but we knew enough to manage the situation.
So some of those gray hairs came from that experience.
Yes, sir.
Yes, my name is Mike Smith. One of the alumni.
Thank you for driving Ms. Stokes, for giving her a ride.
For years, I've always been curious, Dr. Winston. By the way, thank you for the fine words you spoke about the staff. I'm sure they all appreciate it.
Yes.
I've been always curious as to the relationship between the Moorland-Spingarn Research Center and the Schomburg Collection. Can you speak to that?
Well, they both started from the same impulse. Arthur A. Schomburg's impulse to collect, to prove that Black people had done important things in the past, and Dr. Moorland. Mrs. Porter knew all of the people at Schomburg, and they all knew the people at Howard. What some people don't understand was that they were very different kinds of institutions, though they had very similar purposes. The Schomburg was part of the New York Public Library system. So it was public, and it became a problem as Black history became more popular, they were overwhelmed and under-resourced because headquarters didn't care for this place up on 135th Street. We were part of a university, so we had a different kind of way of operating. I was born in Manhattan. I had been at the Schomburg before I came to Howard. I knew what it was, but they're very different. Just as people talk about HBCUs, every one of our institutions is distinctive. Some people just think black. Okay, so they're colleges, so that they're black colleges. No, they're distinctive. So the Schomburg has a different vibe, different form of support from the New York Public Library. And for many years, they were scandalously underfunded. And then they had their moments of rebirth also. But from staff to staff, director to director, there were always very good relations. And they became very well known because nearly every book about the Harlem Renaissance talked about Schomburg. And so that was one of their assets, even though they were in a system that wanted to neglect them. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's very different.
All right. Any more questions? Just to close, I have in 1 minute. Yes.
Can I do something, please? Because I don't think I can leave this without doing this with Dr. Winston. So I'm a junior staff person on this trip to Vernon Jordan's to collect Vernon Jordan's papers, and memorably, when Dr. Winston talks about him as a prince, that brings back the memory at dinner. It brings back, we had a tomato soup at dinner that was cooked by his chef. But the thing that stands out most in my mind is Dr. Winston and Vernon Jordan. They went at each other at the dinner table. Dr. Winston, I'm sorry if you don't agree with this. Okay.
Help yourself.
I'm sorry. But they went at each other intellectually and socially at the dinner table. Vernon Jordan would say something about Dr. Mays, and Michael Winston would say, "Oh yeah, I remember such and such and such." Well, did you know Joe Blow? Oh, Joe Blow. I knew him when such and such. And they went back and forth just like this. The bottom line is Vernon Jordan got beat in there. Okay? It got to a point, I don't know if you remember this, Dr. Battle, but Vernon Jordan got to the point where he was actually silent. And that was part of the collection process. I left there so impressed because I didn't know any of the people they were talking about, okay? But for every person that Vernon Jordan could name, Dr. Winston had a story about the person. He knew the person personally, or he worked with him, or he did this or whatever. It was a wonderful, wonderful experience to see the person I worked for representing us, holding their own and winning that battle at the dinner table. That's what I remember. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
May I make a comment?
Yes, please.
Of course.
Winston.
I'm Judy Winston, been married to Dr. Winston for 60 years. Wow. But one of the things I have always been most impressed by in the places my husband has worked, in the university, and other places actually as well, and it goes to the issue of respect. I was always very impressed with the fact that whoever worked in the organization that he was in, he would always refer to them by their titles or their, Mr. So-and-so, Dr. So-and-so, no first names, although they knew each other well. And to me, that was a clear demonstration of the respect that I know he always had and his staff always had for each other. So I just wanted to
Wow.
mention that if I.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Winston. Yes, yes, thank you.
I think we would be remiss if, I don't recall hearing these names at all, but we would be remiss if I did not acknowledge the tremendous contributions to the success, certainly of the directors, that was given by Millie Baker, Neil McDaniels, and Rosa Anthony. They functioned as the executive or administrative assistants, but I could not begin to see just how much they contributed to whatever success that we had. And I know many other staff had been identified, but I don't recall that we had specifically mentioned those who had served in that because that's the key role of the person who has also direct contact with all the administrative areas of the university. And I would say that whatever success I enjoyed as director, I can attribute much of it because all three of those individuals worked with me while I was in that position.
I have just a footnote to a footnote. I first met Millie P. Baker when I was assistant dean of the College of Liberal Arts. I had known her as a remote president, but that year that I was assistant dean of the college, I saw how much she was doing, and I kept urging the dean to get some help for her. I wasn't lobbying for a raise, but she worked all day at her desk in the morning, was piled up with all kinds of recommendations, personal purchase orders, and all kinds of things. And she would have a big mug of coffee and a cigarette and go at it all day long. And not one of the deans would get some help for her or give her a raise. So at that meeting I have talked about with Dr. Cheek, after he said, "You got every penny you have requested in the budget," I left his office, went over to Lock Hall without missing a beat, and asked her to come with me to Moorland-Spingarn. And we worked together very closely for 10 years. When I got ambushed to become vice president of academic affairs, first thing I did was ask her to go over to the puzzle factory, otherwise known as the administration building, to work together there. And we worked 7 years. So we worked together 17 years. And she was, as Dr. Battle said, not only a crucial person in making things work in Moorland-Spingarn. We used to have a meeting every Monday. Dr. Battle, Mr. Johnson, Mrs. Baker, and me to plan the week. And then it all ran. And so she would definitely be on the list, but the list is longer than people think.
Right.
Yeah, it sure is. And all these stories that Dr. Winston just mentioned, he talked about these people. He's people at Moorland in our interview, so you can watch it. Yes.
Yeah, and before we close, I hope that during our next celebrations, as we continue to celebrate Moorland-Spingarn Research Center, that we do something to honor those staff members that worked here. And that's been everyone, not just the professionals, but everyone that worked here. And many are with the ancestors now, like Millie and
Rosa.
and now Rosa's still here.
Donna Wells.
Yeah, Donna Wells. So it's many are with the ancestors now, and I hope that at some point we do something to honor all of the people that worked at Moorland-Spingarn Research Center.
Yeah. Yes.
I know we have to close,
Yes.
but I just want to make one comment. I know you all probably picked up on it, but it wasn't completely articulated. But one of the great things about Moorland-Spingarn is the investment in the students that have come through. I know Dr. Winston mentioned it, Dr. Muse mentioned it, but the investment in the students is one of the things that really stood out to me about Moorland. Because they invested in all of them. And that's why we all gone on to successful careers, because the Moorland staff poured into us. Like, I still talk to Moorland staff, so I haven't worked with it in almost 10 years. We still talk all the time, and they still provide support, they still provide advice. I know I could call them at any time for any support that I would need, and I pay that forward and provide support to all of the students that I've worked with, because that was the example set for me. So I think that's one of the things that is great about Moorland, is that they have invested so much in their students that they've gone out and then provided support for others. So Moorland has beget other archival professionals and historians, teachers. They've come directly from the work of the people on this panel and the people in this audience who have mentored people, who've taken you home, who bought you food because you didn't have food. They saw you didn't have any food and you didn't have to ask. They just bought it for you and said, "Here, take this," because I know you're sorry, you have to ask. And just the level of investment that they make is something that should be applauded, because other places, they don't give that level of investment in their
It's
students
called
or
what?
their food.
It's called love.
It's called love. They don't impart that level of love.
And we were a family. We were a family. We worked, but we were a family. We still are a family.
That's right.
Thank you, Lopez. In fact, you mentioned students, Lopez, and I was going to make that my last question. So for our veterans, just in 1 minute or less, since we have a lot of students even working at the Moorland-Spingarn Research Center, what advice can you give them? Just a couple of pieces of advice. And for Ms. Woods, you represent the present and future of Moorland-Spingarn. And where do you see Moorland-Spingarn in the next 5-10 years, in 1 or 2 minutes? So I'll begin with Dr. Winston.
Advice to the students. Read. I'm serious. The book is the most powerful instrument that has ever been developed. And you would be amazed at how many people who have advanced degrees, they get their degree and they're through reading. They already know it. Right? And so if a person commits to learning something new every day, and one of the media happens to be a book, I would say make sure you read a book every day you eat, and then you straight.
One of the terms that's commonly used today, and certainly by a majority misused today, is a term called woke. In my youth, being woke meant you were watching your back. I would encourage students to have an appreciation for just what being woke is. You're not awake, you're asleep at the wheel. And there seems to be some negativity projected among some about being woke. As it relates to Black history and culture, we've been kept asleep for a long time, except in the kinds of institutions we're talking about. So I would simply say, take advantage. And I say that as a student who, when I came to Howard University and saw what the Moorland-Spingarn really was, it made me almost unable to, well, it made me unable to really understand how it is that what we know as Black history could have been so hidden away, but it wasn't hidden. It was here in Founders Library at Howard University, just as it was in New York City at the Schomburg, and as it was in some other institutions. So I would say, stay awake, take advantage of these resources, because that's what has provided the opportunity for us as a people to survive. It is knowledge.
Dr. Muse.
I concur with Dr. Battle. I would just say that any opportunity that is afforded you as a student at Moorland-Spingarn, take advantage of it, because you never know where it can lead you, and you never know how you can benefit from it in the future.
Dr. Simsworth.
I concur with the two of them, and also say that I was so impressed with the students that I met when I was visiting here a few months ago. I mean, I was just blown away, and I'm just so impressed with what you are doing here. I know that the legacy lives on, but also remember, you can learn from us, but we also learn from you.
Got to.
So just continue the work that you're doing. I am so proud of you.
Mr. Coates.
Yeah, in line with Dr. Winston, the reading is extremely, extremely important. I would really encourage you, encourage people, period, to develop and appreciate the curiosity that you have, especially inside of our history. And don't allow that curiosity to be forced into a pre-told story of what our history is. Here, especially at Moorland-Spingarn, are the stories that are not told, that still have to be discovered, still have to be explored. And the only way they get explored is stepping outside of what people map out as our history, and stepping outside of that history and going to the outside of it. And the only way you can do that is by having a curiosity of how this stuff fits together, how our stuff fits together. And here at Moorland, more than any other place in the country, those stories are here either in the manuscripts or they're in the library division, just waiting to satisfy your curiosity or expand it.
Yes, thank you. Ms. Woods.
So you asked me, where do I see Moorland-Spingarn Research Center in the next 5 to 10 years? Dr. Winston, I was looking at your master plan from 1982 this morning. I want to share it with staff, but there are some things on that master plan that I see being fully developed in the next 5 to 10 years. Once we take the little tour that we're going to take, Wilders already knows what you're going to see, and some other people do too. But we're going to take you to newly renovated, newly open storage space that you and the rest of the staff have been asking for 40 years. Because that has taken place and we're in the final stages of bringing all of the collections here in this one building, it's going to make it easier to fulfill some of the goals or bullet points in your master plan. I see expanded and increased frequency of finishing processing collections so that they can be open to the public. I see increased staff, and I see Moorland as a training ground for MLIS students. I also see a museum, freestanding museum, in the same way that Kelly Miller really would have wanted, not just a room. I see Moorland as a steady and routine partner with WHUT and WHUR to create programming in ways to tell the stories that you know can be told, that you all know that can be told using our collections. We have a radio station and a TV station here on campus. Why shouldn't we
The only black-owned PBS station
why should
in
we
this country.
be the prototype for how some of these stories are told? So I see a lot. And it's a blessing to sit here on this panel with you all, because I see your name, we see your names all the time. And so it's good, and it's good to be able to witness other staff members see Thomas Battle see Dr. Muse, who we all talk about. Wilda talks about you all. Teddy talks about, but Dr. Winston, some of it is gonna be a little spicy, but some of it is gonna be. So, but I see us being able to accomplish a lot of the things that are on your master plan from 1982 in real and tangible ways. So.
Thank you
Yes,
so
sir.
much. What a panel. It was so good. Each of you, we have the utmost respect for you and what you have accomplished here. We really appreciate it. Before I call on Dr. Talton for a few closing words, I want to invite Ms. Diane Dillon Ridgely to give us her reflection.
I'm gonna do it without the crutch, so you get the best.
Don't rush. Take your time.
Okay. Unabashedly, I begged for this. I flew from Iowa. I've lived in Iowa the last 45 years. I don't even remember exactly how it was, because I don't remember applying for a job. I remember you calling me and telling me you had some things you wanted me to do. And that turned out to be some of the first translations from the Kurt Fisher collection. And the provenance of that is interesting. And I had some stories, and you also need to know when to leave the stage. And I know you want to do the tour. But I will say this, I hadn't planned to. On October 23rd, about 2 weeks ago, my daughter had brain surgery for a tumor. She's gonna be okay. And I would be there. I was there. But she said, no. Please, mother, please go to the 50th anniversary. She says, they have heard about my two kids. I wrote a piece called The Best Job I Ever Had. I've had appointments from 3 presidents. I've chaired conferences at the UN, and I'm not bragging. I've done a lot of stuff. But the reason I was able to do that, the job that I had at the Moorland-Spingarn Research Center in 73, 74, before I got married, beautifully sent me off up to Boston. I saw such a level of care and loving. I'm a 5th generation native Texan, come from the Deep South. But what I hope we never lose at Howard or any of the HBCUs or as a people is an understanding of when I interrupted and said it's love, that's the point. There's a wonderful interview from Danette Benton, who's currently one of the stars in The Gilded Age. And she was doing an interview because she's sort of playing a pseudo Ida B. Wells, and the real T. Thomas Fortune, supposedly, is the person that she's doing herself. Okay. She was doing this interview, and it was a white, and look, we're beyond, cookie cutter descriptions of who people are, but this person had been assigned to do this interview. And so she was asking her a question. And I could see on her face the way the question had fallen. Because the person said, well, why should we care about all these things? And she said, well, we always knew we were important. We always cared about each other. Y'all just didn't. And I remember literally being here at Howard when Nina Simone was singing Young, Gifted, and Black. And somebody asked her something. She said, honey, isn't it against white people? You're just irrelevant to this discussion. I am talking to my children, my next generation. And so we have a responsibility and an opportunity. I've written him letters because he gave us, I had no portfolio to be there other than that if he asked me to do something, I was going to do it. I was going to do it thoroughly. I was going to do it to the best of my possible intent. Because you did not want to present anything that wasn't excellence in this setting, because you were setting a precedent for other people. And when you got the assignment, he mentioned Kelly Miller, or when the Haitian collection, and he said, well, this is Dr. wait for Whitney and Logan. I said, I'm 19 years old. And I'm sitting there wait for Whitney and Logan. You know, that's absurd. Or, and I'll stop. Sterling Brown, wife had passed. And you could see that he had begun to decline. I walked around campus with a reel-to-reel to tape him. And I hope somewhere those tapes still exist of him doing his own poems. But you gave me the office next door to where your son is now. You gave me the office next door, and you told me, now, I want you to make sure he's okay, and I want you to listen to him. So for the first 5 minutes of any story, he was telling me the story, but after that, I could have been, as long as I was alive. And I remember meeting Michael Harper a few years later, and Marcus said, what? You got paid to listen to Sterling Brown talk every day? I mean, there's no way in the world that I will ever have any experience other than he told me, Old Lim. He told me what motivated the strong men who keep getting stronger. You can't get those experiences. You can get wonderful experiences, but you can't get those experiences anywhere else. You have a jewel, we have a responsibility, we have an ownership and an obligation to those who have come before us, and especially to those who are yet to come.
Yes.
And so the way in which we handle that, we polish it, we keep the facets brilliant. That is our responsibility. That's why I flew here today. That's why my daughter wanted me to. We love this institution, the people who have made it and who will continue to make it. Thank you, Dr. Townsend, for allowing me to bogart my way into the program. Not the first time or the last time probably that I would do that.
Now, Jesse, I'll answer your question.
Yes, sir.
The connection was the person who is the current chairman of the Board of Trustees at Howard University, Dr. Lawrence Cornelius Morris, who was my student.
I know.
Best one I ever had. That was the connection.
But so he told you to hire me for this? Because I thought he was still in London at that point.
There is communication across the Atlantic.
Okay. And Lawrence, Larry, is godfather to both my children, because I was his campus pal when he came. Because we are family, it is all about love. Do never forget what you got in this, because sometimes we would say we love Howard anyway, because there were days that fit. But I can't express enough how important it is for us to care for, nurture, and never abandon this institution.
Thank you so much. That was a beautiful reflection, and we wish your daughter well. Dr. Thompson.
Thank you, Teddy. Thank you all. This has been a master class in the history of Moorland-Spingarn, and I wish that Christiana McLean were here. Where is she? Okay, because Christiana is processing the Moorland collection, as I said, and she was sitting there, and as you're speaking, she's encountered these stories. She's seen them. She's nodding her head very vigorously. And so in the near future, we're going to see more of Moorland's history, not just in these rooms, not just in these conversations, but we'll be processing these papers and digitizing some of them. So thank you all again. We have, before we close, I want all the former staff members of Moorland-Spingarn Research Center, please stand up. Please stand up. We are grateful to you. We serve not only the legacy of the Global Black Experience and the legacy of Howard University, but your legacy as well. So we appreciate the foundation that you laid for us. With all the current staff members of the Moorland-Spingarn Research Center, please stand up. Many of them are standing in the back. One thing that Dr. Sims once said is that we were a family. Then she corrected, she said we are a family, because she visited Moorland a few months ago. So she was able to see who we are right now and to see our future. And as I said at the beginning, I say this all the time, and I get a little emotional. As Dr. Winston says, the students who are in Moorland-Spingarn, our MSRC scholars, our interns and student employees, those are my students. I go home and I speak about my students. They're Miss Wood's students. They're Miss Vortia's students. They're Miss Thompson's students. These are our students. They go to class and they have their professors, but these are our students. And they're very, very important to us. The most important thing I do is to reach out to these students. Could you please stand up, all the Moorland-Spingarn students? They come in here and they've embraced. Howard students already own the campus. You can say that. Howard students already own this campus. That's one of the beautiful things about Howard students. You own this space. But the Moorland students are built a little bit differently. They go above and beyond. They have 15 hours. Sometimes they hear 20. Jasmine sleeps in my office. She takes naps in she lives in Hyattsville, Maryland, so she uses my office as her waylay station. But they also bring their friends. So we have a lot of students hanging around in Moorland-Spingarn, and this is our future. And when I think of our future, when I think of Moorland-Spingarn students, I'm not only proud, I'm not only confident, but I'm grateful to the legacy that they're going to be carrying on. So thank you all again. We have a tour. Let's thank everybody. Thank you, Teddy. We want to thank Dorian and Nick, who did our sound. Keith, who's our videographer. Rebecca Hainsworth, who's Prime Time, who does all things from MSRC. Thanks to the Provost office. We will have a tour in about 10 minutes. Mr. Brandon Nightingale, did he leave?
He's somewhere.
Okay. And Ms. Woods will shepherd this tour. We'll show you some of the construction going on, and we'll also show you the future and present of Moorland. We have to shout out two more people before we close. Ms. Lila Sue Williams, who wanted to be here, who could not be here, she sends her regrets, was someone who really stood firm ground with Ishmael Childs and Sonia Woods during COVID and helped lay the foundation for our short-term growth. She couldn't be here. But also Howard Dodson, the iconic director of the Schomburg Center in New York, is dear to my heart as a Harlemite and as a New Yorker. Much of what you'll see was his vision. He didn't carry it to fruition because it was supposed to go into founders as well. But the undergraduate side, Swigert wanted to put Moorland-Spingarn in the minor hall, the UDC building that they're renovating right now. But Howard Dodson wanted to put it upstairs in the founders reading room right now. But we're still in the reading room, but we're also downstairs in UGL too, and you'll see that in a few minutes. Thank you all so much. This has been fantastic. Yes, we need to honor the staff. We'll think about that in the future. We continue to honor you. Thank you for your legacy. Thank you for your work. Thank you for your friendship.
Very, very, very nice.
Thank you. It was great. Good job.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for taking the next step.
Thank you. Yeah. But I studied small mine.
Where's here you go.
Right.
Over the middle? Yeah, okay.
I'll get to
That'll cut down the number of photos we get sick, right? Let's just go ahead and. Where's Mr. Richard Jenkins?
Rebecca, you got us all?
Coming in?
The board?
Yes, I'm trying to get these up for you.
Yeah, they're talking.
Richard,
Take a number. Come on in, jump in.
Richard, Ida,
This from came to left.
Wilda,
should join too, as a satellite staff.
Yes, Wilda.
She's on my feet.
You know, look at that, stars. We born the same
Camera.
same year.
We're looking at Keith and Rebecca.
Thank you. Next time we'll have, we could do everyone, obviously. The panel going to be soon. I know. Ida Jones, she said she wants to get her book on Kelly Miller research. That'll be a good get. Dr. Sims Woods, her book, we need to get these.
Cheerleading, I'm into it. I'm sophomore psychology. I'm really interested in getting into the research side. Employment opportunities.
So most of our employment now is being funded by African American Studies. I ran out of money.
Say also the round table.
Yeah, just to see.
Yeah,
And then I know I was always on call for something, and then after that, then it was like, it's so